Bobby, 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 baby, Bobby, booby. Bobby should be a woman. Remember Marianne Elliott's mic drop back in 2018 when she demonstrated what the point actually is of putting on a revival show and how to utilize its full potential? Deemed nothing more than a gimmick by the Sondheim purists, a gender-swapped version of the 1970s Broadway show Company, centering around the 35th birthday of the eternal bachelor Bobby, is actually the only way to make this story still ring true in our modern society. Sure, back in the 70s it was still an anomaly not to settle down and not to get married, but in this day and age where one has to maneuver through the jungle of dating apps, F-boys, pandemics, constantly being bombarded with nihilistic views that love doesn't actually exist, it's not surprising that people are staying single for longer, sometimes even permanently. And if you do manage to somehow find a partner, the skyrocketing cost of putting on a wedding is enough for people to just forgo the whole ordeal and just settle for cohabitation. Obviously, this really heavily depends on your culture and your environment. Even when I think back of my friends in Belgium, a lot of them are in long-term committed relationships, they've bought houses with their partner, they even have children, but they just never got married. Whereas I feel like my friends here in Britain really value this milestone still quite a lot, and so I have to plan my summer around 8 trillion weddings. Oh, to be in your 30s. To the antagonist of the original show Company, the pressure to settle down is not as threatening to a 21st century audience. Now, you could obviously choose to make your revival a period piece, with the story still set in the 70s, you don't really have to change anything script-wise, but like I said, you do then run the risk that audiences won't really connect with your characters. So instead of taking the boring approach of staging a revival and basically just producing an outdated carbon copy, Marianne Elliott decided to shift the focus onto a different pressure that is ever so present in our current society: the pressures of being a woman. Naturally, that meant that our protagonist Bobby, B-O-B-B-I that is, becomes Bobby, B-O-B-B-I-E. And because Bobby is still heterosexual, allegedly at least, her potential partners also swap gender. So April, Martha, and Kathy become Andy, PJ, and Theo. One additional gender swap is Amy, who becomes Jamie, which adds a gay couple to the mix of Bobby's friends. Now, for the people who might have only seen Company featuring a male Bobby once or perhaps twice before watching the female version, these gender swaps might be the only differences that they noticed. But anyone who's been following this channel for a while now knows that that type of superficiality is not how things are run around here, okay? I analyze every difference. And I mean every difference. If Marianne decided to add a fart, I want to know why it smells like baked beans. Too far? Yeah, probably. In this video, we are going to discuss how the gender-swapped version of Company manages to address the different types of pressure that women face in today's society and even erases some outdated stereotypes without really changing the script that much. So let's take out our magnifying glasses and inspect just how much Bobby being a woman affects the whole show. The opening of the show stays pretty much the same, except for a little gender swap update where PJ now calls in regards to a negative STI test instead of Martha leaving a voicemail to squash a pregnancy scare. A fun solution to still convey the same thing: Bobby isn't returning their phone calls. The first uniquely feminine pressure that the show tackles is symbolized by a sound right before the opening song. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the ticking of the clock. Now, I don't know if this has ever been officially confirmed, but I don't think I'm going to extremes here by saying that the ticking represents a woman's biological clock. Gasp! As a woman in my 30s, I can confirm that that ticking is a very scary sound, okay? Luckily, I'm still in my early 30s, so I still have time. Normally, hopefully, if everything works well down there, knock on wood. But the weight of having this expiry date really does put a lot of pressure on us to make big life decisions in perhaps not that much time. Like I mentioned in the intro of this video, a lot of people are staying single for longer. So if you only meet your significant other at the age of, let's say, 35, your subsequent pregnancy is already geriatric, advanced maternal age. So even though on a societal level it is more accepted to first focus on your career or perhaps go traveling before settling down and starting a family, Biology hasn't changed. The female body has not installed the update, okay? This ticking actually becomes a motive throughout the show. It's used during most scene changes, symbolizing that it's always in the back of Bobby's mind. And it even culminates into this domestic nightmare that Bobby has after sleeping with Andy. In this nightmare, she's confronted with the potential future stages of her relationship with Andy, where they move in together and she's cleaning up after him, to her then becoming pregnant, giving birth to the child and taking care of the child while she's still cleaning up after him. A nightmare that, let's face it, for a lot of women is actually just their day-to-day life. Obviously, there are women who don't experience this as a nightmare and actually choose to be a housewife. But for the majority of women in a heterosexual relationship, tasks such as taking care of the household or raising children falls on them by default. Which just so conveniently brings me to my next point. The next type of pressure the show ever so subtly manages to weave into the existing material is the household mental load. This is hinted at by a tiny extra line, so teeny tiny that I even had to go back to make sure that it was actually there. In the opening, after David says his greeting, "Happy birthday from us," Jenny quickly adds in, "and the kids." 3 words. Just 3 words that instantly fill me with dread because it signifies the mental load of the household that to this day still primarily falls on women in heterosexual relationships. And the kids reminds me of how my mom meticulously made sure every year that each and every one of us signed the Christmas cards. The Christmas cards that she bought, that she wrote the addresses on, which she has kept up to date, for her to then also be the one to put them in the post. And that is only the most minuscule example of this household mental load. Even though the inclusion of these 3 little words are probably lost on the majority of the audience, it does really speak to the level of detail that went into this production. What adds a really interesting layer to this, though, is that in the gender swapped version of Company, this particular couple, Jenny and David, actually swap typical gender roles despite staying the same gender. In the original, Jenny is a stay-at-home parent and David is the breadwinner, but in this version, it's the other way around. So for Jenny to be the provider, but to still take on at least a share of that household mental load, is kind of signifying that the two aren't mutually exclusive. You can have a full-time job and still take care of your household. Women have been doing this for quite a while now, in case you didn't notice. What you definitely have noticed, I'm sure, is this gorgeous chair that I've been sitting in this video. Well, Flexispot saw me sitting on my bedroom floor in my Mean Girls video and were kind enough to send me their Lotus recliner. That's right, your girl is starting to collab with brands now. I feel like I'm becoming a real YouTuber. Now, I'm gonna be really honest, when Flexispot first reached out, I was like, I don't think I have the space for this in my tiny London flat. But let me tell you, for something this comfortable, you make space, okay? The Lotus swivel-based recliner chair was incredibly easy to assemble, which says a lot coming from someone who has managed to mess up IKEA furniture before. And I'm actually genuinely so happy with this addition to my home. It's perfect to enjoy a cup of tea on a slow morning or to wind down after a long day, and it definitely enhances the experience of watching your favorite movie musical. It's upholstered in high-quality, breathable fabric, its ergonomic design includes integrated lumbar support, and it has this cute little drawer to store your crossword puzzles in. Flexispot is currently offering a £70 discount on their Lotus recliner and up to 55% discount on other items in their Valentine's sale, so I'd strongly recommend you check them out. Links are in the description. Thanks again to Flexispot for saving my bum from the cold floor. The first couple we meet, Sarah and Harry, broaches the subject of yet another type of pressure that women have to deal with: body image. Without changing a word from the original script, Bobby's interaction with Sarah takes on a whole new meaning now that it's 2 women discussing whether or not to eat a brownie. The ever so heavy, no pun intended, topic that is a woman's body. How convenient that the show already had a scene about a brownie. Specifically, Sarah's comment about Bobby being skin and bones really hits very differently now that Bobby is a woman. And even more importantly, a woman who is thinner than Sarah. I also love the choice of making Sarah work out during the whole scene to really layer it on thick that she wants to lose weight. This takes up a lot of her brain space. Besides highlighting these invisible pressures that are imposed on women specifically in our day and age, Elliott also strived to bring the show into the 21st century by undoing some outdated stereotypes. The first one she tackles is female rivalry. If we go back to the opening scene, we'll notice that an interaction between Joanne and Susan is completely cut. In the original script, after Bobby says that he's he's fine without fortune, fame, and his first wife, Joanne says, "You bet your ass, baby." Susan then innocently proposes that he might have meant that semi-humorously, to which Joanne responds, "Oh, isn't she darling?" That whole bit gets cut from the revival, and I can think of 2 reasons why that happened. 1. Eliminating the stereotypical portrayal of catty women. Joanne is a cutthroat character, that stays the same. She still says her iconic line that she is rich and married and that she would introduce him but that she has forgotten his name. Despite her abrasive manner, Joanne does act as a comic relief. But when she says, "Oh, isn't she darling?" about Susan, she's not really being funny. She's kind of just flat out mean in that moment. And that doesn't really work anymore with the more human portrayal of Joanne in the 2018 version, but more on that later. The second reason why I think this section got cut is to avoid presenting women as dumb, which I do have mixed feelings about, if I'm being honest. Like, obviously there are women in this world who are perhaps a bit more naive, and men too, and anyone who identifies as anything else. But I'm sure they have other redeeming qualities, you know, like I don't think their existence is a stain on womanhood. So I'm not sure if I would have gotten rid of this side of Susan's personality. Although I guess the sole purpose of this line being written in the first place is to set up Joanne as a bitch, and so if we're getting rid of "Oh, isn't she darling," we might as well just move on straight away, that's true. Another label that Marianne Elliott erases from the female characters in her show is the one of being needy. In the original show, in Sarah and Harry's scene, Sarah actually says "I love you" at the end of the scene and Harry does not respond. This unrequited declaration of love actually happens again in a later scene between Jenny and David. This extremely boring stereotype of the needy woman versus the stoic man obviously gets replaced in this feminist reinterpretation by something a little less demeaning. In that first scene, instead of seeking some sort of reassurance by saying "I love you," Sarah now does the complete opposite and scarfs down the brownie. A delicious act of rebellion. Seeing David and Jenny are actually the couple that swap gender roles, their entire dialogue is also now swapped, and so it is David who says "I love you." Technically, Jenny doesn't say it back, but she does give him a kiss, so she responds. Because, you know, she is actually emotionally intelligent enough to understand that her partner is trying to connect with her in that moment. And also mature enough not to play mind games with her life partner. The biggest example of updating archetypes in the show is Joanne. Patti LuPone adds a bit more of a human touch to the rich, older, mean lady trope by overall being a bit warmer towards Bobby. She also has a little drunk stumble at the end of her scene where then Larry says that she can lean on him, which I really appreciated the inclusion of this moment. It's nice to see a little bit of tenderness between them so we don't solely have to rely on Larry's word when he says that Joanne doesn't act this cold when no one else is around. Like, I low-key have always wondered if Larry's lying that moment just in an attempt to not feel emasculated. So it was nice to see their chemistry act out in real time. Now, of course, it is a lot easier for Joanne to soften up a bit in this version as her dynamic with Bobby has changed completely. She now no longer tries to seduce Bobby. Because of the gender swap and the decision to keep them both straight, the writers had to come up with a solution for this scene. Their answer was to have Joanne try to convince Bobby to have an affair with her husband. Interesting. At first I wasn't sure if this choice is still as effective, but come to think about it, it still boils down to the same thing. Self-sabotage. After singing Ladies Who Lunch, a song where Joanne basically admits her self-hatred, Larry has his monologue where he says he'll never leave Joanne despite her being a bit of a handful sometimes. Following this monologue, Elliot decided to add a beat between Bobby and Larry. When Larry leaves to go to the loo, Bobby follows him because she thinks that he's going to pay for the bill and she really wants to pay this time. Joanne, witnessing this moment from afar where Larry happens to adjust Bobby's hair, fills her with so much insecurity that her instinct is to ruin her relationship. In the original, this moment between Bobby and Larry obviously doesn't exist, but Larry's declaration of his undying love makes Joanne feel like she's not worthy of his affection, and so she still has the same impulse to sabotage. And so she tries to convince Bobby to have an affair with her. In a new version, she tells Bobby to have an affair with her husband. So a slight change of the key players, but ultimately still meeting the same goal in the same setting. Bobby's revelation after this proposal takes on a new twist as well. In the original show, Joanne says that she can take care of Bobby, and Bobby responds by asking who he will take care of then. In the new version, Joanne says that Bobby can take care of Larry, and Bobby then asks, but who will take care of me? I think it's a very astute observation that women in general aren't looking to take care of someone like we already are taking care of pretty much everyone around us. No. What we actually want is for someone to take care of us for once. This simple change in the dialogue reflects the deep-rooted issue that women are constantly being pushed into caretaker roles, even primed for it from childhood with toys like dolls and kitchenettes. It's interesting to note though that even though our bobbies approach their issue from pretty much the exact opposite angle, they still reach the same conclusion. In the male version, Bobby admits to himself that he's ready to let someone in, to truly care for someone. In the female version, Bobby's conclusion is that she wants someone to take care of her. She's finally admitting to herself that she is not an island, that she craves connection despite having pushed it away for years out of an act of some sort of self-preservation. And so in the song Being Alive, they can still both have that same journey of coming to terms with compromise. Things won't go 100% your way in a relationship, like someone ruining your sleep, for example, but at the end of the day, it's still worth it. I'm honestly so in awe by changing only a few small things, the show still manages to convey the same message, but in a way that feels more authentic to its new protagonist. It really speaks to the genius of Sondheim's original piece. The seduction scene between Bobby and flight attendant April/Andy on paper stays the same, but in direction, Elliott decides to even out the playing field a bit. Instead of using the typical power dynamic between men and women where men are almost expected to make the first move, to hunt their prey, Elliott has Andy embrace his himbo character and almost uses it as a tool to seduce Bobby. As opposed to April, who adopts a more passive stance in this seduction game. Like, she just speaks every thought that pops up in her head, but nothing is actually an attempt at flirting. She just lets it happen to her. That being said, the show isn't naively proposing that the way women interact with the opposite sex is the same as how men interact with the opposite sex, especially when it comes to being friends. The when Harry met Sally question, aka can women and men just be friends, kept popping in my head during interactions between Bobby and her male friends. And a lyric change in Poor Baby affirmed my hunch that Elliott ever so subtly wove in this layer of one-sided sexual attraction. Instead of Poor Baby sitting there, staring at the walls and playing solitaire, making conversation with the empty air, we get Poor Baby so unfair, nothing left to do except to wash her hair. Maybe I should call her just to... And then Jenny interrupts and says, don't go there. Oh yeah, in case you don't know, Poor Baby is now sung by the men. I wonder why Jenny is so quick to shut down David's idea there. Is it perhaps because she's seen the way David subtly touches Bobby a little bit too often mid-conversation? Also, remember Larry touching Bobby's hair when she tries to pay the bill? Besides Joanne's attempt at having an affair with Bobby, which we have already discussed is more fueled by self-sabotage rather than this raw sexual attraction, none of Bobby's female friends come even remotely close to flirting with him in the original. And I think that most women can agree that dealing with this one-sided sexual tension is almost inherently part of being a woman in today's society. Whether that is due to the objectification of women in media, or due to a sense of entitlement because of male privilege, or even just a lack of emotional control by a lot of men, we are subjected to this weird dynamic more than we should. So I'm a big fan of adding this layer to the story. It's yet again such a small difference that might go unnoticed by the majority of the audience, but in the end, it does contribute to the overall atmosphere of the show. Honestly, the amount of thought that went into this adaptation really shows us how much respect Marianne Elliott has for the original work. And I appreciate that a lot. I really think that that is the key ingredient for a successful adaptation. But this new version isn't just a girl's girl. Oh no, it actually also goes out of its way to never fall into the traps of male stereotypes. Have I Got a Guy for You is now sung by the women and Jamie instead of the men. With just the tiniest changes, the 2018 show manages to never objectify any of Bobby's prospective partners. Larry's phrase, dumb, and with a weakness for Sazzer, X-Lings, yada yada yada, the kind of girl you can't send through the mail, is now sung by Joanne, and she sings smart, but with a weakness for Sazzer, X-Lings, yada yada yada, the kind of stuff you can't send through the mail. You see, only a word here and there, and it actually makes a world of a difference. Some of the other lyrics get some small tweaks as well to accommodate the fact that Bobby's prospective partners are now male and so not expected to be the typical housewife. So the lyrics, what do you like? You like an excursion to Rome, suddenly taking off to explore. What do you like? You like having meals cooked at home. Then what do you want to get married for? They become, what do you like? You like laughter filling your days, somebody on your side evermore. What do you like? You like constant showers of praise. Then what do you want to get married for? So still staying true to the message of the show that marriage isn't as rose-colored as fairy tales make them out to be, but without bringing in negative assumptions about men. Right, so after discussing just how much the 2018 revival added to the show, I think we can all safely disregard any accusations of the gender swap being a gimmick. When you closely look to the two versions side by side, it's actually mind-blowing how much can be achieved with seemingly such little change. But these details are proof of the dedication of the team to the show. Look, if the goal of a gender-bent company was to just rustle some feathers in order to get some publicity, we would have never had this level of careful consideration. Take the lyrics of Someone Is Waiting, for example. It would have been very easy to just slot in the names of the male counterparts and just call it a day. Perfectly possible, seeing all names have 2 syllables. Sarah, Harry, Jenny, David, with the exception of Paul, to be fair. But instead of Someone Is Waiting, cool as who is Sarah's partner, Harry, easy and loving as Susan's partner, so Peter. Instead of that easy way out, we get a whole new set of adjectives showing us what women look for in a potential partner instead of men. Someone Is Waiting, sweet as David, funny and charming as Peter. The creative team made sure that this is Bobby's story and not Bobby's story. In our current musical theater landscape filled with jukebox musicals and movie adaptations where, let's face it, the focus really has shifted from making art to making money, I can only speak highly of this production. But what about you? Did you love this revival as much as I do, or do you have some beef with it? Let's air it all out in the comments. I love to read the tea. And you know the drill. If these type of musical theater video essays are your thing, then definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button. Oh, and also the notification bell. Apparently YouTube doesn't push my new videos to all of my subscribers, which really makes me wonder what the point even is of being a subscriber, but okay. On that note, if you're currently having a little YouTube binge, I would love it if you could check out my previous video, which flew a little bit under the radar. In it, I discussed my conspiracy theory that Evan Hansen is actually Henry from Next to Normal. And let me tell you, the evidence is compelling. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.